Welcome to the Center for Unconventional Entrepreneurship. We are honored to be sitting here with possibly one of the few people I really truly admire, not because only his experience with working with organizations that support innovators, startups, entrepreneurs, and SMEs, but also because you've been an entrepreneur yourself, so you walked the talk, so to speak, and you know what it means to be sitting on the other side of a table. Tell us a little bit about your experience working with organizations that support entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much, York. In my background experience, I've got three different specialities of where I was actively either involved from the inside or the outside in supporting entrepreneurs. The one part is SME growth finance, where I was part of an investment firm that specialized in Pan-African and Middle Eastern medium-term loans that supports only SMEs in Africa and the Middle East. And the other part was pure enterprise development from a grassroots level right up to an advanced level for entrepreneurs in different phases from a startup to an advanced stage. The third part that I was involved with is overarching transformation strategies that fits a particular territory in order to create synergy, with that as the emphasis, where transformation cannot happen unless synergy can be demonstrated as part of a strategy to restructure oneself in a way that is authentic and doesn't change the DNA of an organization in doing so.
One could argue this organization, I guess, is is it a corporate or is it don't need the names, but okay. And how, entrepreneurs are a very specific bunch,
right,
as a class of businesses, and it's actually the future in many ways. So how do you bridge this large organization, whether it's provinces, cities, municipalities, corporates, whether it's accelerators, incubators, enterprise development? These are organizations that are institutionally not designed to cope with entrepreneurs, yet they have to. What are the kind of observations you've seen in how they design programs to support entrepreneurs?
Yes, look, there's a lot of good intentions, I would like to think, in some ways, and in other ways there is pure opportunism involved from the corporate, where they have the ability to enhance their bottom line first and providing some type of product that plays into this bottom line of themselves. For the entrepreneur that is the beneficiary of this organization, it is very important that one understand how to speak and understand their language, where they are coming from, so that they can do the same for themselves. They shouldn't just plug in directly as a beneficiary. They should also understand how their bottom line will be enhanced, but by not just participating in this program, but also knowing that the organization that they deal with looks after their bottom line first and then theirs, and they should do the same. In order to do so, there is a language which is different from a corporate speak right up until the normal entrepreneurship speak. Of course, the cultures are different. So we spend a lot of time educating the entrepreneur on the communication tools that is the most effective in reaching their bottom line, but also getting what they want from this particular corporate, where everybody is actually out to enhance their own bottom line, whilst conforming to the incentives out there that does have some loopholes, unfortunately. I do know this sounds quite negative, but I'd like all entrepreneurs to be vigilant around themselves, because at the end of the day, number one must look after number one, and synergies are out there, but you need to know which ones are for you and which ones are not necessarily going to work for you.
So this is actually an interesting point, which is saying, look, as an entrepreneur, align yourself with the organization that says they want to support you, where the interests are aligned, with their profit or their outcome. It's a win-win situation.
That's correct. Yeah.
And not just an expenditure for do good.
Correct, yes.
How, because often these organizations that support entrepreneurs, whether it's corporate, whether it's sponsorship, whether it's non-for-profit, are very vague and very open in what they're trying to achieve.
Right.
The advice that you would give a corporate or an organization wanting to support entrepreneurs, what would you say to them?
Well, it's very simple. There's an emphasis that needs to change from compliance towards a certain incentive into a culture of really understanding the beneficiary that they want to support. So where compliance is the main driver for the relationship, that is normally the route in the past where things have not been mutually beneficial. Once one looks at every beneficiary not just as a part of an incentive, but an understanding of how the incentive and this particular beneficiary could benefit in the currency that the relationship has defined.
Mm.
That's the right route that a corporate should look at. Sometimes these incentives are in silos, as we do see from scorecards and from performance drivers that is driven by legislation, and that doesn't keep up with the real needs from the entrepreneur. An easy example would be where you need education on entrepreneurship, but you also need finance once you start to actually be successful in applying this education. Very few, if any, organizations would provide education on the one side and the finance. And that in the real world of entrepreneurship is one and the same thing. You cannot have growth without finance, and education preeminates you to go further if you are applying that successfully.
One could argue that there's a lot of, like you said, organizations that actually mean to do good.
Yeah.
And so it's not per se faulting on the intentions, but on the application, on the way these organizations are trying to support entrepreneurs.
That's right.
How much, in your experience in the work that you have done, would you say is doing things in-house versus outsourcing? What is the balance there that an organization should look at?
Yes, I think that's a very good question, and the answer would be to maintain your focus and your unique selling proposal as an organization providing as an incentive or advised business offering.
Okay.
I'd like to encourage them to develop trusted partners with strong SLAs in place, so that these organizations can hold each other accountable, but also be enabled to be focused. So let's say when the one organization provides compliance and education and entrepreneurship development, the other one will be a pure finance instrument, but there will have to be an interactive legal relationship between the two that work in tandem.
Right. So I've done a lot of work with organizations around the world, and there's always two sides to the story. There's the organization that's trying to do good, that supports entrepreneurship, sometimes just as a flag waving, and sometimes really because they want to make an impact.
Yeah.
And yet entrepreneurs constantly say, or are frustrated with the support ecosystem that they experience. What is, in your experience, some of the biggest frustration entrepreneurs have, realistic or unrealistic, around what organizations can do to support them?
Yes. Well, it's exactly like you say, York. It depends on the point of view, and sometimes it's a two-way street. But perhaps to start from a corporate point of view, bums in seats and just simply attending in order to pass a course is not really beneficial to the entrepreneur. By the same token, the entrepreneur gets a message then if he just pitches up or if he just participates, then he will come on out successful. That is also the wrong message that you will be giving. So compliance, yes, it's extremely important, but compliance is definitely not the main focus for a beneficial relationship between a corporate and a beneficiary when it comes to enterprise development.
Talking about this fishing net, I've seen a lot of organizations trying to support as many entrepreneurs, like you say, bums in seats, as humanly possible. But that also means entrepreneurs who are just people with ideas right up to the growing enterprises. What's your experience around focus?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So it's important to understand the different archetypes of entrepreneurship, notwithstanding the stages that you are in. So when we are looking at the different stages, there's also the different archetypes of entrepreneurs where you will see different advantages or disadvantages at play when you put the two together. One thing that I have found is that South African entrepreneurs generally have a lack of focus, and a economic right to exist doesn't merely create itself by having a good business idea. Good business ideas is the first step in a long journey before you have an economic right to exist. And simply becoming an entrepreneur with a trade or a specific skill that you do have isn't necessarily equating to becoming an entrepreneur. It may equate that you are self-employed, but there's a difference between the naivety that we have in the South African market about how they view entrepreneurship on the one side, that you will receive a successful future when you just do compliance with an incubator. It doesn't warrant anything. And on the other side, understanding what is an entrepreneur versus what is somebody who's self-employed. There's a vast difference because the one is scalable and the other one is not.
In this scenario, what are kind of the things, some of the mistakes, and now not necessarily blaming in organizations that supports entrepreneurs, but what are the kind of mistakes that you've seen personally, organization developing programs? What are some of the bigger ones?
Well, yes. So some of the organizations that I have worked with have placed an undue pressure on administrative compliance to the detriment of an entrepreneur at some stages, where an entrepreneur is perhaps going through a particular challenge that requires resources of another kind to apply themselves in a team context to solve, whereas the particular incubator would choose to ignore that there are different shall we say 911 emergencies or...
Okay, so like it's blanket approach, go for training versus, okay, right now your business model is...
Correct. So yes, I'd like to say that entrepreneurs go through different stages of success and failure, and sometimes there are emergencies, and one needs to incorporate in your curriculum a flexibility, a phlegmatic approach to contract and expand towards situations like these. Otherwise, you will lose the trust relationship with the entrepreneur by just enforcing a blanket approach.
And this brings us to the next point. So there's research on both sides of a fence. The one says, let's develop a prescriptive approach to developing entrepreneurs. The other one says, no, let's keep it as sort of flat structure as possible and let the entrepreneurs thrive by themselves. What do you subscribe to?
Well, by nature, an entrepreneur is creative and needs a platform and a framework to hone his skills in. So almost like the Montessori school model, where you have a sandpit and everybody can do what they want in the sandpit as long as you do not harm the others. That works for Montessori throughout the ages and is considered best practice for a school model where you have a framework, and inside the framework creativity is encouraged, allowed, and then even rewarded as well. Outside of that, there is normally then going to be a situation where that is not really going to provide any value for anybody. I'd like an incubator to also perhaps look at that type of structure where anything goes inside a certain prescribed framework that everybody agrees to.
I want to focus a step above the incubator, a step above the corporate. A lot of government, cities, municipalities are tasked, if you'd like, pressured because of the direction in which the world is moving, where jobs are becoming scarcer and scarcer, to support entrepreneurship. But these are not individuals, and again, not blaming, but just from the background, from the career as professional politicians, bureaucrats,
right,
that are not able to understand the entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Correct.
What is your advice you would give to an administrator of a city, municipality, a government of a province? What kind of, in the context of what they can achieve, especially in the context also of your Montessori kind of sandpit?
Yes.
What advice would you give them?
Well, it will be quite simple. There's two different messages that I'd like to get across, or get an understanding with, in order to get the best results. With an entrepreneur dealing with a public official, one normally has a shared environment of opportunism, whether it's above the law or not. There's always that risk. But you have a shared opportunism that you can take advantage of. Now, how to do that is an approach that I'd like to compare with marriage, where sometimes it's not so important to come up with the idea that is the correct one, but it's more important to get the buy-in from your partner, sometimes in a way that they need to feel like it was their idea in order to go forward. So no egos is one of the most important parts of a successful public-private partnership, shall we say, or a SME and a public institution partnership. No egos is very important, and that normally requires to walk a mile in each other's shoes, to understand each other, get some currency. And number two is understand that the opportunism can be used in both environments in a way that is hopefully legal, of course, not the type of stories that reaches the headlines, but the good ones where one understands the advantages from a public sector perspective, will achieve certain of their ideals, that is part of his performance scorecard, and then by the same token, it is in congruence with what the entrepreneur needs to do in order to expand himself as well.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying, look, as an enabler of SMEs, to create an enabling environment for SMEs to thrive, make sure that the initiatives that you set up, whether it's working spaces, free internet, accounting software, whatever the case may be, is actually aligned with what the entrepreneurs need and your scorecard as a city, as a municipality.
Correct.
Otherwise, you're going to get this divergence where you attract a lot of entrepreneurs.
That's right.
And false expectations.
That is correct, yes. And understand that there will be a different language that each one needs to be at least proficient in from each other. That's what I mean by walking a mile in each other's shoes. But what you do have is shared opportunism, and opportunism in the context of a synergetic result for the bottom line of both departments.
In my experience, what entrepreneurs need a lot of is access to market, clients. And access to market, in my research, is really an access to networks perspective.
Right.
In your experience, our incubators, accelerators, enterprise development programs, cities, municipalities, it doesn't matter now who is creating the enabling environment, doing enough to support entrepreneurs with accessing networks?
Yes. Well, I believe that traditionally, or from, shall we say, the reputation or even the experience of most entrepreneurs in the relative short history of the South African democracy has been pretty negative, in the sense that it seemed like a closed club. It seemed like a who knows who club. Mm-hmm. And that is definitely not an environment where networking will be thriving, even if you are the best networker on the planet, especially when looking at the public sector. When looking at the public sector, networking is actually a transparent way of understanding who resonates with whom, especially on a prerequisite theme or industry, or even a specific platform, let's say if it's construction or whatever the industry might be, where networking is actually a transparency tool that is part of good governance for the public official. For the entrepreneur, a real and perceived platform that is provided by the municipality organization that is a public one is a commitment in terms of walking the talking, not to close up the environment for procurement for Who's Who Club or Who Knows Who Club anyway. So it's a great transparency tool. Of course, there's ways for entrepreneur to do better networking, and of course there's tools for municipality, but there's a lot of courses and things around that for those who are not proficient in it. But what I think is the message that is sent by a municipality is very powerful on an organization that wants to be transparent in a real and perceived fashion.
Brilliant. Any last pieces of advice you would give organizations wanting to support entrepreneurs?
What I'd like to see a little bit more is an understanding that different entrepreneurs are at different stages, and they will not be able to help each and everybody.
Right. So
lip service is, at the end of the day, a blanket approach that doesn't work. What I'd like to encourage a public institution is to know exactly what their mandate is, what fits into their sweet spot, and to embrace that particular target group of entrepreneurs, and have a very honest way of explaining those who do not fit into that sweet spot that it is perhaps the wrong avenue for them to approach.
Right.
The bottom line of the advice is a quote that I got from my one director, which I thought was very powerful, is that the definition of integrity is how fast you can say no. And it took me quite a long time to understand that it was not negative, but how fast you can say no, meaning you're not in my sweet spot, but respectfully, perhaps that would be a better avenue. It's the best you can do for an entrepreneur that is not going to provide a win-win situation for you and your organization.
Absolutely. Know where you stand, know what you're offering, know who you're targeting, and then maybe direct those who don't fit that profile to other avenues of support.
Correct, yes. You will waste your own time and that of the entrepreneur, and the result will not be good for either party.
Brilliant. Hanno, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate the interview.
Thank you for watching.